is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Saturday in July. Jonas, the veterans have reported to training camp at one winning drive. Neither of us are there right now, but we will be at some point in the near future. You probably later today. And we will have a complete report on the BaltimoreBanner.com, by the way, from training camp. $1 for 6 months is how you can subscribe. If you're listening to this podcast and you don't subscribe to the Baltimore Banner, I just don't know what to tell you at this point. By the way, give us a like, give us a thumbs up. Anywhere that you are listening or watching, we really appreciate it. And write us a good review. That'd be really nice. Jonas, we are live here on a Saturday to talk about what we expect from this Ravens training camp. We're going to give some potential headlines that we could see. We're going to dip into the future and look at the headlines that we could see from this training camp. But first, Jonas, the first day of training camp is one of those days where typically you have all the reporters lined up outside the facility. You've got the players streaming in. It's the first time that we've seen them in forever. And there's excitement. There's palpable energy in the air. And people on Twitter are going crazy to see their favorite Ravens show up back at the facility. I'm going to go ahead and say mini camp, the fact that we have already seen these guys at the Ravens facility a mere month ago kind of takes the shine off this moment. It's not as fun as it used to be.
I think also the fact that Lamar has already reported has taken some of the shine. And we've seen, you can only get so hyped for so many clips of large dudes walking through door frames. Like we've seen Derrick Henry walk through the facility. We've seen Zay Flowers walk to the facility. Besides just surprise edition X or surprise edition Y, I don't really know where the juice is on this. With all due respect, I mean, reporters had the option of going to the report portion of today's session, but I respectfully declined because, frankly, we're not close enough to even get a look at these guys. If they're limping, it's kind of hard to tell because of just how far away they set up the cameras and everything. So, screw it, man.
We're kept at a safe distance. It's not to diminish the reporting of anybody there. I was there last year, and I believe last year it was like 3 hours earlier than it was this year. This year it was like a manageable 10:45. Last year it was like 8:30 in the morning, just at the butt crack of dawn. But to quote Rick Pitino, Larry Bird isn't walking through that door. There's nobody that's walking through that door that we haven't already seen that is going to really get our juices flowing. It's not like the first day of spring training where it's been since October 15th that we've seen any of these guys. And it's the first time we're seeing Corbin Burns in an Orioles uniform. It's just, we've already seen Derrick Henry at the facility. We've already seen Lamar Jackson at the facility. We're ready to go. But Jonas, before we dive into our training camp preview, we should touch on the fact that the Ravens added a third safety. Their perhaps biggest roster hole heading into training camp has been filled. They sign Eddie Jackson to a 1-year deal, the 30-year-old former Bears Pro Bowl safety. What did you think of this move when you saw it yesterday?
Necessary in one way or another, whether it was Eddie Jackson or get back in a time machine and sign Jamal Adams or pony up more money and sign Justin Simmons. I mean, we talked about how they never adequately replaced Geno Stone. This isn't a close competition, that there still is a chance that Ardarius Washington wins it. But as a bit of a size guy, I am not in love with the idea of having a guy playing 50 to 70 snaps a game who's like 5'8", 175, 185, whatever Ardarius Washington is. Sinusa Kane went in the 7th round for a reason. Bro Braid undrafted for a reason and, missed a lot of offseason workouts. So I think bringing in a guy who, Pro Bowl safety Eddie Jackson is a little bit misleading because that was 2017, 2018. It's been a while since he's been at the top of his position, but there is at least a track record of him being on the field, being a good communicator, helping the Bears defense, which was pretty resurgent last year in a kind of surprising way. So, is he going to be the guy who, saves this Ravens defense from disaster? I don't think so, because I think this defense floor is pretty dang high. But I think, depending on what the contract details are, and of course we don't know those haven't come out. I think it's a pretty safe and smart move.
Yeah, there's a reason he's available in the third week of July, and his play tailed off a good bit last year with the Bears in his seventh season. According to PFF, he was in the 70s in terms of grades for safeties. He really took a step back. His tackling certainly took a step back as well. But in his prime, he was very good. Is he closer to being cooked than he is to his prime? Perhaps, but he did make 2 Pro Bowls in 2018 and 2019, and they don't necessarily need him to be phenomenal. Marcus Williams has only played 21 games over the last 2 seasons, so there's a good chance that they will call on Eddie Jackson to play a good amount of snaps, and we saw just how much that third safety role how Geno Stone had that breakout season last year that earned him that contract from the Bengals. May need quality passable play from that third safety, but like you said, Jonas, they can like Ardarius Washington all they want, and they certainly have said good things about Ardarius Washington, and the coaches are high on him. But how much can you really rely on a guy who's 5'8", went undrafted 3 years ago, missed most of last season with the chest injury? You just can't have that guy be playing a lot of snaps and be the first call that you make if Marcus Williams has to miss more time, or God forbid, Kyle Hamilton goes down.
Yeah, and with all that being said, though, Ardarius Washington being 5'8", being a $170, whatever he is, you would expect his tackling to be an issue. Eddie Jackson, a guy who is, I think, like 6 foot, 190, 200 pounds, last year was a real struggle for him tackling.
Yeah.
I think, you look back at what Geno Stone's deficiencies were last year. It was tackling. It was tackling in space. It was, having to bring down David Njoku. It was, being able to be athletically equivalent to some of the guys that he would meet in the open field. Geno Stone's missed tackle rate, according to Pro Football Reference, last year was like 11%. Do you want to take a guess what Eddie Jackson's was last year?
Not good, I would imagine.
17.8%. So I would feel very, very wary of a guy who misses one of every 5 tackles. Maybe it was just something that was compounded by the foot injury he's dealt with. Obviously, I think it was the Liz Frank last year or 2 years ago, and last year I think it was just a normal foot sprain. But he's never really been a guy who's had that missed tackle rate in like the 5 to 8% range, which was kind of where you would like it for a starter to be. He's missed a lot of tackles over the years. That's just traditionally something that he has struggled with. So, is a change of scenery going to maybe change that? Perhaps maybe the Ravens just are. They school these guys better on the fundamentals than whatever kind of clown show operation Chicago has been rolling with the past few years. But that is a concern, just about how effective the Ravens were at limiting explosive plays last year. And now you bring in a guy who last year had probably the worst of year of his career as a tackler and is now on the wrong side of 30.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of these defensive backs recently, teams have been very, very reticent to be signing these guys who hit 29 or 30 years old. I mean, we still see Justin Simmons out there who was available, still is available, but perhaps was going to ask for too much money from the Ravens for them to want to sign him. Jamal Adams. These guys do take a big step back athletically for the most part when they hit 30 years old. And we just saw an absolute disaster of a season really from Eddie Jackson last year. Started 12 games the year before that, but teams are very afraid to be giving that kind of money to these guys. But you hope that you can squeeze a little bit more juice out of Eddie Jackson at this point in his career. But at the same time, it's not the end of the world. It is a third safety role, and you have 2 Pro Bowlers in line ahead of him.
Yeah, and I was kind of curious as the Ravens were looking into the safety market, how important it was that they go and get someone so that they could free up Kyle Hamilton to be the guy in the slot, be the guy in the box, not have to worry too much about doing Marcus Williams type stuff, Ed Reed type stuff. So I looked at like basically the Ravens' 10 most impactful plays on defense last year, as measured by EPA. that Kyle Hamilton was on the field for. Like I think number one was pretty easy. It was him deflecting the pass to himself against the Browns, taking that back for the score. There were a lot of other interceptions. There were a couple nice defensive stops. Of those 10, Paul, do you want to guess how many Kyle Hamilton was either in the slot for or in the box for?
This is
So this isn't a trick question. Just go with your gut.
Right. This is his most impactful plays from last year.
Just the Ravens' most impactful plays when he was on the field.
On the field.
And keep in mind, he was a guy. He was on the field
right.
I think the PFF splits were something like 400 snaps in the slot last year, 275 as a deep safety, 215 in the box, and then 50 or something along the line of scrimmage when he was pretending to be a blitzer or actually a blitzer. So of the Ravens' 10 most impactful plays, just in terms of affecting the outcome of a game, how many was he in the slot or in the box for?
Probably 7.
Close. Yeah, I thought it would be it was only 6. So
okay.
There were 4, close to half, 4 of 10 were him lining up as a safety, picking guys off in, the split safety looks that the Ravens and other teams run, which was kind of surprising to me. I thought that, maybe it's something where you extrapolate it to or you look at the bigger sample, and there is evidence that Kyle Hamilton being closer to the line of scrimmage is better for the Ravens defense. But there were a lot of plays made by that Ravens defense, made by Kyle Hamilton himself, where he was playing in this role where we think he's not the most effective. So I think that's a good sign for the Ravens that hey, if we want to roll with just 2 safeties and put Marlon Humphrey in the slot and Brandon Stevens out wide and Arthur Maulet or Nate Wiggins or Jalen Armour-Davis, who else at that third cornerback spot, it won't be bad. And I think it's also good for Kyle Hamilton to continue his development at all these very, varied spots on the field. Just don't be a one-trick pony. Not that anyone is accusing Kyle Hamilton of being a one-trick pony, but get those reps, as a, 2-high safety, get those reps as a center fielder, because you never know when you may need that experience. And I think it's just a healthy sign for his development, for the defense's development, that he can play a lot of different spots. And, signing Eddie Jackson doesn't pigeonhole Kyle Hamilton to be one specific thing for this defense.
Yeah, what makes Kyle Hamilton so effective, one of the many things that makes Kyle Hamilton so effective, is the quarterback. The offense has no idea what he's going to do on any given play. He could rush the passer. He could drop back into coverage. He could really do anything on any given play. I think of the Niners game, which was maybe his biggest game as a pro so far, where he was all over the field, affecting the offense in so many different ways and making Brock Purdy's life an absolute nightmare. So that is the kind of impact that he can have. So to keep the offensive coordinator and the quarterback guessing as to where Kyle Hamilton is on the full, luxury for the Ravens to have, and in order to keep him that effective, you have to consistently move him around a lot. And I think that that's what the regular season is for, so that when you get to the playoffs, that's all the quarterback, that's all the offense can think about, is where is this guy lining up, and is he going to come? Is he going to go? Where is he going to be on the field? All right, Jonas,
right.
Go ahead.
Before we talk about camp, I had a bit of a question, a bit of a prediction for you. Okay. So deep secondary, some of these guys, or a lot of these guys, are unfortunately injury prone. Talking at safety, Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, Eddie Jackson, throw in Ardarius Washington just for good measure. Cornerback, you've got Brandon Stevens, who did yeoman's work last year, but also I think had a late season ankle injury. Marlon Humphrey, obviously, Nate Wiggins, Arthur Maulet played often and well last year, Jalen Armour-Davis. If we're looking at the end of the year, who in that secondary, and rank them for me, has played the most snaps 1 through 5 in that Ravens secondary? I'm not asking you to
in the 2023 season.
Yeah, just the 2023 season, accounting for what you might think happens with depth chart rises and falls, with injuries, with everything. Who is going to play the most snaps 1 through 5 in that Ravens secondary?
Wait, who is going to for 2024, or who did last year?
Who did? Who will be playing the most snaps in 2024.
Oh, in 2024. Okay. If I just had to guess, I mean, Kyle Hamilton probably number one. You would think for the secondary. Assuming he stays healthy, you have concerns about Marcus Williams. You have
Well,
concerns about.
that's the big thing. I know. I'm asking you to put yourself out there. Like, take a
Yeah.
take a guess on all the injury stuff, because like if you want to be kind of concerned solely with Kyle Hamilton, you will say you might feel a little bit squeamish about that knee, because I think that was an issue for him at Notre Dame. It was an issue for him last year. He plays this reckless style of football that is extremely lovable, but also maybe a little bit more injury prone than the Ravens would like. I don't know.
I'd go Kyle Hamilton 1, Brandon Stevens 2, Marcus Williams 3. He's got to be healthier this season than he was his first 2 years with the Ravens. Marlon Humphrey 4, and Nate Wiggins 5. That's my 5 in that order.
Yeah, I think I would probably move Marlon Humphrey up, just because I think I'm a little less worried about him being as beaten up last year as he was. So I might put him 1 or 2. I am a little bit worried about Brandon Stevens, just because they asked so much of him from a defensive standpoint and a special team standpoint. I think he played like there's a next gen stats statistic from last year where he played like he covered the most ground, or like the second or third most ground in the entire NFL, just by like yards covered. It was like him and Geno Stone, because of them doing so much on any given day. So you worry a little bit about some of that wear and tear. I think Marcus Williams might finish number 1, just because I don't see him getting hurt again. I think it's just been flukes for him, and safeties will not come off the field. So I'll go Marcus Williams 1, Marlon 2, Brandon Stevens 3, Kyle Hamilton 4, because again, I'm a little bit worried, and then probably Nate Wiggins 5. But it wouldn't surprise me if like Arthur Millette just locks down a slot job in a weird kind of way.
I think you're underestimating the Marlon Humphrey injury factor, but I mean, the number of games that he started and then had to leave. I know you just wrote that piece in the BaltimoreBanner.com, which is phenomenal, about how every single time he struggled, it felt like it was a game. It was his first game coming back from an injury. And every one of his good performances in 2023 was a game right before his injury. Those injuries can't just be popping up the way that they did with as much frequently as they did last year.
Obviously the best way to get around that this year is, because he's technically coming back from an injury, is just start him in a preseason game, get the terribleness out of the way. Boom.
Sure. Yeah, that's how that works. Exactly. All right, Jonas, let's touch on our training camp previews. We've jumped forward into the future about 6 weeks. And banner.com are headlines that we expect to see from Ravens training camp. What are the stories we're going to be talking about in 4, 5, 6 weeks time? Jonas, why don't you start us off?
Ravens set to enter 2024 season with most inexperienced offensive line in franchise history? ? This is, I am a nerd.
You can't. I mean, do you write your own headlines for the Banner? I really hope not.
I'm a former editor. So
you stumble through that one.
I know I shouldn't have a question mark in there. This is like a New York Post style headline where it's just really, really inflammatory. I looked at the data from like the past, 25 plus years of week 1 offensive lines. The offensive line that entered with, a season opener with the fewest combined starts was ironically John Harbaugh's first year in 2008. That was Jared Gaither, Ben Grubbs, Marshall Yanda. Those guys were in their second year and had started. Only 66 combined starts for that group, but still, like, you at least had this foundation of guys who had played together. If this year's offensive line ends up being Ronnie Stanley, Andrew Voorhees, who obviously didn't play at all last year, Tyler Linderbaum, Ben Cleveland, Roger Rosengarten, that's 126 combined starts, which I think would be like the third fewest of any Ravens week 1 offensive line, and probably would stand out because, Voorhees hasn't played. Cleveland's never started more than a couple games in a season. Roger Rosengarten is obviously a rookie. So it is a very, very different kind of, experience and seniority on that line with, Ronnie Stanley obviously having been through some injury attrition and everything that he's gone through. So I don't see a way that this offensive line comes together where it's not extremely, extremely young. And you just wonder, is that going to be an issue? Is age just a number? Or is this going to be something that, really is a deficit, really is a weakness for this team?
It's not just age, it's experience and experience playing together. These guys have not had a whole lot of time. How many times has offensive line continuity affected the course of a season? You don't want to have miscommunications in loud, environments. You're going on the road at some of the toughest environments to start the season, especially in Kansas City in week 1. Arrowhead is going to be rocking to start the season for the back-to-back Super Bowl champs. You don't want to have any kind of miscommunications where you're missing blocks and Lamar Jackson is back there getting squashed. So to me, the bigger concern might be lack of experience playing together and not so much age.
Right. I mean, you look back at 2020, that offensive line, Ronnie Stanley, Bradley Bozeman, Matt Skura, Tyree Phillips, Orlando Brown, only 110 starts together. But again, like 4/5 of that offensive line had started week 1 the year before. So a little bit of different, inexperience or inexperience, I guess, is kind of a subjective stat because it depends on, is that experience any good? Who were you experiencing it with? Who were you experiencing it against? And as you said, to go up against Steve Spagnuolo and that Chiefs defense and that Chiefs crowd is going to be one hell of a, an acid test for where this offensive line is going to be.
Yeah, and the stakes are so much higher when you are an offensive lineman than they would be with a franchise quarterback behind you than they would be if, say, you're a wide receiver trying to get on the same page as your quarterback and you can't hear an audible or you can't hear the play call. The problem is, if you're a wide receiver and you can't hear the play call, you can't hear the audible, you drop the football. That's the worst that can really happen, or the ball bounces into the defender's hands. The worst that can happen if you are an offensive lineman is you miss a block and your quarterback is flattened and he's writhing on the ground back there. So the stakes are very high for these offensive linemen, and I think that's why I still remain concerned about this offensive line group. Jonas, another prediction that I have for you. This is not at the end of camp, but this is after the first preseason game of the year on August 9th, I believe, against the Philadelphia Eagles. The headline will read, Devin Leary tosses 3 picks in preseason loss to Eagles. And the reason that I have this headline in there is because we know Devin Leary is prone to interceptions. He threw 12 picks in his final collegiate season at Kentucky, after really not throwing all that many in his first 4 seasons, but, making a lot of risky throws. That's something that once he got drafted, John Harbaugh said, what's one thing you need to work on? Not turning the ball over. And it will be drilled into him, but he is going to have some growing pains in this offense. And that Eagles secondary has a lot of young defensive backs who will probably get a lot of playing time in that preseason game, like Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell and Keely Ringo. And it's going to be interesting to see how he performs. He's probably going to get a lot of time in the preseason, and whether the Ravens decide to keep him on their initial 53 or whether they expose him to, practice squad and risk losing him is going to be one of the bigger storylines in training camp.
I'm going to throw a flag on this one, Paul, because let's say Devin Leary plays like 6 possessions. You're saying he's throwing a pick every other possession?
Where are you getting that number 6 possessions from?
Because he's going to be splitting time with Josh Johnson and perhaps Emory Jones in that preseason game.
Do you think how much time do you think they're really giving to Emory Jones in this preseason game 1?
Like at least half the fourth quarter.
Do you think? You think they're giving him that much time when they want to see what they haven't? There's no chance that Emory Jones, I'm sorry, there's almost no chance Emory Jones makes this team over Devin Leary. I just can't see them giving him that much time at the end of this game. It's 3 weeks away.
How much usefulness is there to Devin Leary going up in there against 4th string Eagles if they're also emptying out the end of their bench, I guess is.
But then what's the point of the whole preseason in general? I mean, what's the point of getting to see more of Emory Jones? There's personally, I'd rather see more of Devin Leary, but I think the Ravens coaching staff, at least you're getting, talk about bad experience. You're just getting to see him going up against fourth stringers, but it's better than nothing, right?
Yeah, I can't remember if the Ravens entered the preseason last year with a fourth stringer. So it's been a while for me to pull from the memory banks of like who the last truly dreadful quarterback was that they threw out there in a game like that. Yeah, I don't
I'm
know.
gonna go back
The
and look
Ravens
at their,
quarterbacks always do a pretty good job of the Ravens quarterbacks always do a pretty good job of keeping the ball out of harm's way but again, Devin Leary is special because he trusts maybe with a little bit too much hubris in that arm strength, and obviously Cooper DeJean is probably going to be licking his chops the first time he goes up against them.
In last year's preseason opener against the Philadelphia Eagles, again at home, Tyler Huntley went 8 for 11. Then Josh Johnson went 8 for 12. Then Anthony Brown went 3 for 8. So they probably will get some. Emory Jones might get some run. The point is that Devin Leary could struggle to start the preseason, and how much he struggles could determine whether or not he ends up on the practice squad.
All right, prediction number 3, or headline number 3. I'm going to go with another headline question. Is this the NFL's most talented secondary? And it's a picture of the Ravens secondary. I just think that this is a group that has a lot. You could also ask the question: is this the NFL's deepest secondary? The fact that Nate Wiggins is going to be probably cornerback 3, the fact that Eddie Jackson, the guy who started every game that he played in Chicago, might be safety 3, might be safety 4, depending on what happens with Ardarius Washington and the rookie safeties, Jalen Armour-Davis, who again, probably is getting the short end of the stick with just like the kind of potential that he has, been the injury luck that he's suffered through. Arthur Mollett, again, like PFF rated him really, really well last year in terms of just how rarely opposing wide receivers got open against him. It's going to be, these guys are going to be hard up for snaps. Pepe Williams might not even make the team this year, 2 years after being a guy who started a good bit of games as a rookie. So it's really, really impressive. The group of guys that they've assembled here, it's probably just, we're probably knocking on the door of one or two of these guys getting a serious injury, because it seems like that's always what happens to this Ravens secondary group. But if they somehow stay healthy, if they somehow develop as they should, if Nate Wiggins is as excellent as everyone around the facility seems to believe he is, then this is going to be a group that is really, really tough to throw on, and that's going to make this defense even more tough to prepare for. Because if you are not concerned about just manning up teams, then you can just send the house, against these quarterbacks like Wink Martindale did, 4 or 5 years ago, and just play cover 0, 20% of the time, and say, we feel good about our guys manning up your guys. Here's 6 blitzers, here's 7 blitzers coming into your lap. What are you going to do about it? So I feel bad for the Ravens wide receivers, but that's life, man. It's going to be a fun group to monitor, even if Lamar Jackson might not like this next month and a half or so.
Yeah, it should be the strength of their defense. It should be the strength of their team, and it should be one of the best units in the NFL. I think no question. The fact that they had an opportunity to draft another offensive lineman or to draft another weapon for Lamar Jackson, but they said, no, let's triple and quadruple down on defensive backs. Let's take Nate Wiggins in the first round. Let's take TJ Tampa in the 4th round and really lean into their strength.
TJ Tampa,
yeah. Strength on strength is what they were attempting to do. Now, whether, they have to feel, and they should feel great about that defensive backs group. Whether they have invested almost too many resources into that defensive backs group, time will tell, because it may come at the expense of not investing in some other position groups. It should be lauded what they've done with this group, and it fell.
Prediction 4 for you, Paul?
Prediction 4 for me, Jonas, has to do with the defense. More along the defensive line, because we make an addition to their edge rusher group and sign Jadeveon Clowney. I'm not going to mention Emmanuel Ogbah on this show. I've mentioned him so many times in so many previous shows. Instead, I'm going to say that they opt for a little bit of a lower ceiling, perhaps lower price tag player. I think the Ravens could add to this edge rusher group over the course of camp by signing free agent edge Carl Lawson. And the reason that I think they could go for him is because he is just 29 years old. It's not like he's into his 30s. And he went from having a 7-sack season 2 years ago with the Jets to playing in 6 games last year, starting none of them, and having 0 sacks. We were talking about him as a potential buy low trade candidate at this point during the trade deadline last year. He ends up hitting free agency, and so far it seems like no teams are biting. I don't know exactly what went on with Carl Lawson in New York last year, but there's got to be a little bit more juice left to squeeze there. And the reason that I have them going with a slightly lower ceiling player is because Adisa Isaac is their 3rd-round pick, is on the NFI list to start training camp. David Ojabo is David Ojabo. You know, he may be healthy for training camp, but and is he really going to live up? Having also won't command a whole lot of playing time, I don't think, as at least a camp body. And maybe if there's an injury, if injuries persist, could make your week 1 roster. I think he makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it sounds like David Ojabo should be pretty good to go early in camp, so that's a good sign. I'm still very skeptical, very much in a wait and see mode after him supposedly being healthy last year and then just not doing anything in any preseason games. That was extremely disappointing, especially against that Washington Commanders game that broke the Ravens preseason winning streak, where that was like a very, very poor offensive line, and David Ojabo didn't look like he had any juice, didn't look like he had any burst. Carl Lawson's interesting. I think he was just a victim of a numbers game there. Yeah, in the Jets pass rush, a lot of great talent in New York that he wasn't able to leapfrog. I imagine he'll probably be snapped up pretty quickly in training camp because everyone needs edge rushers, and that's a position where things can go south pretty quickly for you depth wise. So we'll see. Obviously Malik Harrison is always going to be that versatile guy who you can feel good about throwing out there on rundowns, and that definitely helps to bolster their depth a little bit. But yeah, I mean, we're going to be talking about this edge rush group a good bit. The Ravens seem pretty confident about finding the next Jadeveon Clowney or recreating him in the aggregate. We'll see if that actually comes true. We'll see if Zach Orr has the kind of juice that Mike McDonald did and freeing up those 101s or getting those those great looks for certain guys in certain spots. But all eyes are going to be on our Odafe Owe, on David Ojabo, on Tavius Robinson. There's a lot of interesting pieces up front, but not a whole lot of productivity.
Jonas, what's your final headline?
Paul, who do you think is the animating player of this Ravens podcast?
The animating player? What does that mean?
Who is what player fuels the most angst and agitation and discussion and energy in this podcast?
Who is the most frustrating player, I think you could say?
Yeah, most frustrating player. Of course, it's Rashod Bateman. And
Rashod Bateman.
My prediction coming out of this is, or my headline, I really probably should have written these out so I can have a better saying.
You didn't even write them?
Rashod Bateman will be the most impressive Ravens wide receiver in training camp.
I just want to make this clear that this headline idea was your idea, and you didn't come up with any of these actual headlines.
I'm good at improv. All right.
Clearly,
this is partly me remembering last year that like Zay Flowers got a lot of hype as a one-on-one merchant. Not that he wasn't productive in team settings, but I remember that there was like a lot of talk about, oh my God, Zay Flowers did this. Oh my God, Zay Flowers did that. And then the 7-on-7s come on, and then the 11-11s come on, and he's not really getting a lot of targets. Rashod Bateman obviously missed a lot of training camp last year because he was still coming back from his various injuries. If that connection with Lamar is there, and obviously that is the big issue in all of this, if it is there. I think he can not only do the kind of one-on-one stuff that Zay does, but he could be a guy who, because of his size, because of him lining up inside, outside, maybe him getting more snaps than he otherwise would in a normal training camp because of that desire just to get more reps and make up for lost time. It's possible that he's a guy who, outshines Zay, who I think is definitely going to be improved from his rookie year. But this is just me going out there on a limb and saying, what if Rashod Bateman is the most impressive? What if he's the most productive? What if he's the most efficient, receiver for this Ravens group, or at least wide receiver for this Ravens group? Because it's possible that Mark Andrews just, again, catches everything that's thrown his way. But it would certainly give us a lot to talk about if Bateman both does everything, but also what if he does nothing? And we have to have another uncomfortable conversation about just who is behind Zay Flowers on this depth chart.
I think it's much more likely that he does close to nothing than all kinds of stuff. Imagine him being better than Zay Flowers. Should be better than he was last year. That's just has to be banking too much on him. They hand him that extension for him to give you 300 yards, 367 yards like he did last year. He has to be better and has to start with training camp.
Yeah, and we'll see. He did a lot of crazy work, it looks like, this offseason, training in Arizona where temperatures are like 110 degrees and he's working out in freaking sweatshirts.
Yeah.
So he's coming in skinny. I don't know if he's Lamar skinny, but we'll see. maybe they'll bond over that because Rashod Bateman is lean and Lamar is super lean.
All right. Well, we will have complete coverage of training camp. We'll find out if our predictions are correct for these headlines. At Jonas_Shaffer is his Twitter handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at Albano Sports. Please like, rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. We will have complete coverage from one winning drive over the coming 6 weeks. We are locked in now. No breaks from here to the end